Now, the first person charged and tried under Hong Kong's draconian national security law has been found guilty in a landmark ruling that sets the bar for future cases under the law. More than 120 people have been arrested under the law and more than half of them charged. Joining me live now is our Asia correspondent, Adrian Brown. Adrian, how concerned are you about this?
Well, as you rightly point out, this was a very significant case yesterday, the first time that someone has been convicted under the new national security law. And as you rightly point out, it has now set a template, I think, for what could happen to other people convicted of calling for secession or found guilty of terrorism. The man who was in court on Tuesday, who was sentenced on Tuesday, Tong Yin Kit, 24 years old, a waiter, was convicted following a 15-day trial. Now, what was interesting about this particular trial, Laura, is that there was no jury. The judges, 3 judges, were appointed by the chief executive, Carrie Lam, national security judges, specifically to hear cases like this. So, you know, this could be what we're going to see in the weeks, months ahead with all those other people who've been charged under the national security law. And that's going to mean, of course, that, you know, the system here, the process is going to be backlogged for weeks, if not, you know, years to come, given how many cases have to be processed. I think that no one was really surprised that, you know, Tong was convicted yesterday. I think that was always going to be on the cards. I think, you know, the key question is, what does Beijing think? And I think they will be very satisfied that he's been convicted. You know, from their point of view, people who call for independence, secession, that is something in their eyes, it's the reddest of red lines. It's totally, you know, unacceptable. I mean, I was working on July the 1st last year when Tong was arrested. He drove his motorcycle towards a group of policemen, and attached to his motorcycle was a flag bearing the words, "Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times." That is now an illegal slogan. And the judges decided that the wording on that protest banner equated to a call for independence, and it was capable of inciting other people to do the same.
So incitement is also not only just frowned upon, but under these national security laws, you can be convicted. So does it mean that what, you know, we would regard, Adrian, as civil disobedience is now a crime?
Yeah, and part of the problem, Laura, is this. The national security law, which runs in parallel with Hong Kong common law, and in some cases can supersede Hong Kong common law, is a very vaguely worded law which is being very broadly applied. You know, it's now down to the police to essentially define what is secession. Yesterday's court case has helped make it clearer for judges in future as to what constitutes secession, what constitutes sedition, what constitutes terrorism. But at the end of the day, this law is deliberately, I think, vague because it's much easier to enforce. We have a similar law across the border in China. Just to sum up, Laura, the Hong Kong government will say that the trial of Tong demonstrates that Hong Kong still has, in their view, an independent judiciary, and the fact that the media were allowed to cover this case also shows that Hong Kong has retained freedom of speech. But I think governments overseas and other organisations may well see that quite differently.
Yeah, I think so. Just finally, before I let you go, there's been some heated talks really between the US and China. But if we're taking a positive spin on this, could this lead to the 2 men, perhaps most powerful men in the world, getting in a room and talking?
Yeah, Laura, it's interesting. Watching that visit by Wendy Sherman, who's the Deputy Secretary of State for the US State Department in Beijing on Monday, I sensed that there was just the slightest hint of a thaw in what has been a very icy relationship. Remember the last time that US and Chinese diplomats met? That was in Alaska. That was a very frosty encounter. And while the language was quite blunt from China, it wasn't as blunt as it was in March. So I think that incrementally we are seeing the start of a slow, not total, but a partial rapprochement, which will lead eventually to a meeting between Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping. And after all, you could hardly have Joe Biden and Xi Jinping turning up at the G20 summit in Rome in October and not meeting. So I think it is going to happen. The question is, what the background music will be.